Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wyenberg. This time, we will continue our reading of Village Diary by Miss Reed. I have seldom had a more exasperating day. I began by smashing a Wedgwood coffee pot as I tried to hurry with the washing up, which I'd left in the most slatternly way from last night before going over to the school. At playtime, Patrick fell heavily, took the skin from both knees, and, worse still, a corner off a front tooth. His second, naturally. I was washing his knees in the schoolhouse when the telephone rang, and an underling at the Caxley Education Office peremptorily demanded the return of a form with no delay. This asinine document was devoted to the number, size, material, age, etc. of the various types of desk in Fairacre School. And as we have a motley collection, it took me the rest of the morning crawling around ruler in hand to measure the wretched things. Mrs. Crossley, the dinner lady, left 2 canisters of Swedes, which the children abominate, and no gravy. I wonder what Beech Green School thought of 2 lots of gravy and no Swedes. Mrs. Pringle, rather more disgruntled than usual, reminded me so often of the combustible nature of her leg, properly flared up last night, no better today, that I would have welcomed her resignation, and said so. She retaliated by crashing the cutlery about in a deafening manner all through my geography lesson. I was thankful to get back to the peace of the schoolhouse at tea time and decided to make some grapefruit marmalade. Just as I was engrossed in a tricky bit of mental arithmetic about pounds of sugar and the weight of 3 grapefruit and waiting for my tea kettle to boil, a knock came at the front door. A strange man stood on the step holding a sheaf of tracts. I could hear the kettle's lid rattling in the kitchen and knew from bitter experience that the floor would be swamped. The strange man asked me in sepulchral tones if I had found the Lord, thrusting a tract into my hand at the same time. Thank you, yes indeed, I answered, backing inside and shutting the door firmly. I returned to my swamped kitchen and began to mop up the floor in a very bad temper. Really, Fairacre people must have a name for utter godlessness, judging by the number of earnest souls who present themselves at our doorsteps. Nothing puts me into a more unchristian state of mind than these unsolicited visitors, and yet I haven't the heart to tell them not to come again. While I was regaining my composure over the tea tray, I noticed with horror that the tract was priced at 6pence. I could only hope that my cavalier and grasping behavior would discourage further attentions, but on the other hand, would not have been surprised to hear the stranger returning to demand payment. I was very glad indeed to climb into the sanctuary of my bed and shelve life for 9 hours. The postponed tea party at the vicarage has taken place, and I have at last met John Parr's tenant, about whom I have heard so much. His name is Henry Mawn. H.A. Mawn, the vicar enlarged and smiled hopefully at me. Seeing that I was still unenlightened, he added, "Of the Caxley Chronicle," and I remembered then that the nature notes have appeared recently over this name. I told Mr. Mawn that I cut his notes out and put them up in the classroom for the children to read, and he was obviously delighted. He is tall and very thin and seems a pleasant, unassuming man. Since his retirement, he has spent most of his time fishing and bird watching and is collecting material for a book about downland birds. He seems very well able to look after himself and will no doubt continue to do so, despite village gossip to the contrary. "What I particularly like about Fairacre people," he said to the vicar, "is their acceptance of a newcomer without a lot of unnecessary comment. I found everyone so friendly, but not a bit inquisitive." I could not help feeling that Mr. Mawn's ear must have been singularly far from Fairacre's bush telegraph, which has fairly hummed with such pertinent questions as, "Is Mr. M. a widower? If so, what did his wife die of? And when? Is he a bachelor? How old is he? Who will he marry? And when? How much would his pension be from teaching? Would he have an old age pension as well? How long has he known Mr. Parr? What does he do with those field glasses? Why is he always skulking about the downs? And much more to the same effect. He was very interested in the village school and asked if he might call in to see the children. I said that we should love to see him, and if he would like to give us a nature talk sometime, we should look forward to it immensely. It is good for our Fairacre children to hear someone else speaking in their classroom. Heaven knows they have little enough variety. It is equally good for me to sit back and see a lesson taken by an expert in his subject. At 6 o'clock, Mrs. Partridge took me upstairs to her bedroom for my coat. There is a wonderful view from the windows there of the gentle swell of the downs beyond and the wooded hollow where Fairacre shelters. The spire of St. Patrick's dominates the foreground, and the stubby little bell tower of my school thrusts bravely up beside it. On the bedside table lay a red leather-bound copy of the Bible and a photograph of an elderly man with a mop of white hair who smiled vaguely from his silver frame. "Gerald's father," said Mrs. Partridge, following my gaze. "Gerald always says he was a saint if only I could do half as well." The thought of our good vicar, whose life is as blameless as is humanly possible, sorrowing for his shortcomings, made me wonder in what adverse light my own behavior is thrown. I looked back in that one swift moment on innumerable child slappings, hard words, black thoughts, and 1,000 backslidings, and went downstairs in a sober mood. Mr. Mawn was examining a light horsewhip on the hall wall. "My father used one like that on us on special occasions," he said cheerfully. "Really?" answered the vicar. "Now, my father always shut us up in a dark cupboard under the stairs." I decided that values are strictly relative and felt much more hopeful about my own shaky claims to divine mercy. I decided to let the children write a poem about the spring. They have learnt Robert Bridges' "Spring Goeth All in White" and Thomas Nash's "Spring, the Sweet Spring" recently, and I thought it would be interesting to see what sort of attempts these most unbookish children would make. Their faces, when I suggested this mental exercise, were studies in stupefaction. "What, rhyming and all that?" asked Eric, appalled. "Yes, rhyming," I answered ruthlessly. There was a shocked silence. Miss Linda Moffat was the first to find her breath. "How many verses, Miss Reed?" "As many as you can think of." Patrick then piped up, "Do us have to make it go thumpity-thumpity like that half a league bit you read us?" I said that rhythm would be expected, and they delved into their desks for their pens and English exercise books with the doomed look of those that face the firing squad. For half an hour, the room was quiet, broken only by the solemn tick of the ancient wall clock and the sighs and groans of spirits in poetic travail. After the first few minutes, I had softened so far as to suggest they could begin with "in the spring," and go on from there. As drowning men clutch at straws, so did these Fairacre children clutch at these 3 words which could be copied from the blackboard. After 30 minutes, I collected their efforts and sent them tottering out to play. Never had their young minds been so sternly exercised, and the results were highly entertaining. For sheer brazen effrontery and gross idleness, I think Ernest takes the prize. He had shamelessly lifted intact a verse from one of the tombstones in the neighboring churchyard. In the painstaking copperplate, he had written, "In the spring she drooped and died, now she sleeps by Jesus' side." There is not one spelling mistake. Nor should there be, considering that we pass and repass this inscription a dozen times a day. Linda Moffat had very cunningly covered the maximum of paper with the minimum of effort. Her poem ran, "In the spring the swallows wing, in the spring. In the spring the flowers bring." Bring what, I wonder? In the spring. In the spring we all do sing, in the spring. Perhaps the most engaging poem was Eric's. He is a growler, unable to sing in tune, and incapable of keeping in step in dancing and other rhythmic work. Written in an appalling hand with apparently a crossed nib dipped in black honey, his poem said, "In the spring I has my birthday and usually a hice cake which my gran makes. It is on March 20th. I rather liked the gentle reminder about the fortnight before the great day and felt inclined to give him a couple of extra writing lessons as a present. But for brevity and charm, for a little snatch that reminds one of William Barnes' simplicity in the use of dialect, I think the attempt of young bandage-kneed Patrick takes the prize. His poem read thus: "In the spring it comes on worm." Warm? "In the spring it comes on worm. Us likes the spring. Us has no storm." Yes, warm. Poor dears, how hard I make them work. Truly, the mastering of one's own language is a major operation. The kitten is still with me, and I hope that I shall never have to part with him. He answers to the deplorably plebeian name of Tibby, while I still rack my brains daily for some other more inspired cognomen. Now that the weather is warmer, he plays outside, and yesterday afternoon he ventured across the playground and found his way into the classroom, much to the children's delight. He settled himself in a patch of sunlight on the needlework cupboard, and I foresee many more such excursions to school, as he is a most companionable animal. In any case, I see no reason why a good-tempered, steady-going cat should not be included in a country's classroom. It adds a pleasantly domestic touch to our working conditions. Amy came to tea and brought her sister, who is staying with her as well. She is one of those people, all too common, alas, who bore one to death with accounts of their important acquaintances. Never was a conversation so sprinkled with lords, ladies, admirals, generals, and what-not, until I thought I should be driven to devising a game about them all in order to keep my sanity. It could be done with points, I told myself, my glazed eyes on my visitor and a fixed smile on my lips. 2 points, say, for peers of the realm and their ladies, and for top-ranking people in the services. 1 point for friends mentioned who were working in A, the Foreign Office, B, embassies, C, the BBC, and D, little shops in Bond Street. And none, I decided, as I dropped sugar into my guest's cup, for nephews who had just written. A, an enchanting collection of obscure verse published privately. B, a powerful novel. Or C, a script for Midland region. However, she made a great fuss of dear Tibby and didn't flinch when he ran cruel claws into her beautiful sheer nylons, so that I forgave her for her harmless delusions of grandeur and made her a present of a pot of my grapefruit marmalade when she left. How far this generosity was prompted by my guilty conscience, I should not like to say. It has been a real spring day. The wind has turned due west and is as warm and soft as can be. I have a few crocuses out among the clumps of snowdrops, and there are fat buds on the japonica by the wall, which is almost heartening. Mrs. Pringle, to whom I made a blithe comment about the fine weather, did her best to turn the world sour for me. "See the moon last night, lying on its back?" I said that I had. I had noticed it from my landing window as I went to bed, an upturned silver slice supporting the shadowy completion of its circle. "Know what that means?" inquired Mrs. Pringle, arms akimbo, and her voice heavy with foreboding. Mr. Willett, who was screwing up the catch on the woodshed door and had been listening to our conversation, now shouted across, "Well, you tell us then, what seems to be up?" "The moon on its back," said Mrs. Pringle with much emphasis, "is a sure sign of rain. Moon on her back with water in her lap. Ever heard that? You see, we'll have a tempest before night, a proper downpour." She looked across to my garden, where 2 pairs of stockings and 2 tea towels danced in the breeze. "You've chose the wrong day for washing," she added, and returned to the lobby to scour the sink. Mr. Willett puffed out his mustache with disgust. "Never heard such nonsense," he said to me in a carrying whisper. "Real old wives' tale that about water in its lap. The ignorance, the stuff some of these folk believes in the 20th century. Lives in the dark ages, some of them." He screwed another turn or two, grunting with effort, At length he ceased and wiped his brow with the back of his huge hand. He still looked disgruntled. "Moon on her back, water in her lap," he quoted disgustedly. "A downpour, a lot of nonsense. Why, any fool knows it means a high wind." Mrs. Partridge called after tea to tell me about great goings-on in the WI world. Although I am a member of the Fairacre Women's Institute, I can rarely attend the meetings as they are held in the afternoon. But Mrs. Partridge, who is president, keeps me au fait with the news. Evidently, the county as a whole is to stage a pageant. Each institute or group of institutes will have an historical scene to act, and the whole will tell the story of the people who have lived in this county through the ages. "When do we start?" I asked. "As soon as we've had another meeting," answered Mrs. Partridge. "No, I mean, at what stage of history do we begin? The Norman Conquest, or the Ice Age, or what?" "For the life of me," said Mrs. Partridge, much perplexed, "I don't know, but the county office will send further particulars, I don't doubt." Neither did I, having seen some of the lengthy documents that flutter from that quarter every month. "Do we choose which scene we like?" I asked. I was mentally casting Mrs. Pringle as the 17th century witch who was dumped in the horse pond somewhere near Beach Green. My tone, I noted with regret, was eager. "Now I come to think of it," said Mrs. Partridge, closing her eyes the better to consecrate, "the drama committee have drafted out so many scenes, about a dozen, I fancy, and the groups will draw for them. So much fairer, of course. After all, most women will prefer becoming costumes, and would plump for Stuart times with all those delicious silks and laces." "I rather fancy the Plantagenets," I replied, wondering if Mrs. Moffat could run me up a wimple. Really, the whole project had endless possibilities for fun. "Ah, now that is a good idea," agreed Mrs. Partridge. "I've always had a feeling I could wear long plaits with pearls entwined." We went off into a quiet reverie about wimples and plaits until Tibby, name still evades me, brought us to earth by jumping through the window and knocking over a jar of catkins en route. "Well, dear," said Mrs. Partridge, rising to her feet and becoming her usual bustling self, "that's how it is. The children, of course, will take part. It is to be held on a Saturday in the grounds of Branscombe Castle, and I'll call on an evening meeting for one day next week. We shall know then which scene we're to do and can arrange rehearsals and so on." "When is it to be?" I asked. Mrs. Partridge spoke patiently as to a tiresome child. "I've told you, dear, on one evening next week." I began to feel that Fairacre's vicar's wife and its school teacher might easily go to the halls in the near future as a pair of crosstalk comedians, Partridge and Reed. No, the pageant. When does it come off at Branscombe Castle?" "Oh, I'm sorry. In August, I understand." "Suppose it rains?" "My dear," said Mrs. Partridge with the utmost firmness, "it will not rain. You should know by now, dear, that if one starts to take rain into consideration in village life, well, there just wouldn't be any village life." When she had gone, I pondered over this direction of village activities, which Mrs. Partridge does so well. It is interesting to be living in this transition period between local, and in Fairacre's case enlightened, squirearchy, and whatever communal form may evolve in a village which is, perforce, part of a welfare state. The older people, like Miss Clare and Mrs. Pringle, shake their heads sadly over the departure of the good old days when the gentry did so much for the village, sparing neither advice nor practical and financial help. They looked to the families in the 3 or 4 large houses, not only for employment, but for guidance in matters spiritual and temporal. And now that death or the cold hand of poverty has removed this help, the older generation seems rudderless and at times resentful for the stability that has gone from their lives. "Why, when my father was working as a gardener up at the Hall," said Mrs. Pringle one day, "he broke a leg falling out of the apple tree in the kitchen garden, and for all the weeks he lay up in our front room, regular as clockwork, there came a basket of groceries sent down from the Hall kitchen. That's what I call being looked after." In vain was it to point out that an all-encompassing state insurance had superseded the earlier happy relationship. All forms and stamps, snorted Mrs. Pringle, unimpressed. And some jumped-up jack-in-office in Caxley telling you how to get back what's been taken from you. Give me the old days. It is the personal touch that these older people miss so sorely, the discussion of problems over a fireside, the confession, perhaps, of follies come home to roost, and the comfort of friendly advice and practical guidance. To have to board a bus and sit perplexed as it rattles 6 miles into Caxley, to find an answer to one's personal problems at an office or a bureau or a clinic comes hard to these people, and to be passed from the supercilious young lady in the outer office from hand to hand until the right person is encountered means that the older countryman, more often than not, arrives even more tongue-tied than usual. How much simpler it all was, he will think dazedly as he stares at the ledgers and typewriters and the man who waits with sheaves of forms in front of him, when he walked round to the kitchen door at the hall with his troubles, confident that he'd be home again within half an hour with his course set plain before him. As Miss Clare put it, I know it's a great comfort, dear, to feel that one will never starve, and that sickness and madness and death itself are looked after. For an old woman in my position, the welfare state is a blessing. This national health scheme, for instance, has taken a great load off my mind. But I miss the warmth of sympathy, foolish perhaps, but there it is. It did both of us good, the one who told his trouble and the one who tried to help. For I suppose we were both united in overcoming a problem and in sympathy with each other. I suggested that the present system might eventually be better. After all, advice from the hall might be bad as well as good, depending on the mentality and disposition of the owner at any given time. Yes, agreed Miss Clare, in the long run, I think each man will think out his own problems. But it is going to take him a very long time to realize that the machinery for coping with these personal problems is set up by his own hands. We in a village, my dear, can understand a small community government. It's not much more than a family affair, and we all appreciate our relationship. But when it comes to a nation, with ministries and councils and departments taking the place of the parish clerk and the parish priest and the squire, well, naturally, we're a little out of our depth just at the moment. Well, I feel for her. We will follow Miss Reed further into the spring and into Caxley next time.